The old house stood on a hill overlooking the town, a silent sentinel, shrouded in shadow and draped in ivy. Locals told tales of its original occupants, a family torn apart by tragedy. Whispers spoke of a fire, a grieving mother, and a child lost too soon. But the true horror of the house lay dormant within its walls, hidden away in the dust and cobwebs of the attic, a forgotten relic, waiting for an unsuspecting soul to awaken its malevolent spirit. The doll's eyes held a chilling presence, two black orbs reflecting an evil that time itself could not erase. Legend had it that the doll was crafted by Silas, a solitary toy maker known for his lifelike creations. When his young daughter Ilara succumbed to a fever, Silas was devastated. Driven by grief, he decided to bind his daughter's soul to the doll. He performed a ritual, chanting forbidden incantations as Ilara took her final breath. The doll's eyes snapped open, glowing with an eerie light before fading to dull black. The townsfolk, sensing something unholy, drove Silas away. Silas spent his final days in the old house, haunted by the doll that now held his daughter's trapped soul. The doll remained in the abandoned house long after Silas breathed his last. Over time, the legend of the cursed doll faded into obscurity. The attic with its haunting resident became a place of whispered rumors. But the doll's power was not dormant, merely waiting for a new owner to manipulate and torment. Its glassy black eyes, eternally fixed in a malevolent stare, seemed to watch the world go by. The doll, trapped in its prison of porcelain and cloth, yearned for freedom, and as fate would have it, its wait was about to end with Sarah, an antique collector. Sarah, a young woman with a passion for the forgotten, had always been drawn to the strange and unusual. One crisp autumn afternoon, she stumbled upon a flea market stall piled high with dusty relics. The stall owner, a weathered old man, greeted her with a toothless grin. Her gaze fell upon a wooden chest tucked away in a dark corner. It was ornate and ancient-looking, its surface carved with strange symbols. The old man, sensing her interest, chuckled softly. "Curious piece, that one. Found it in an old house up on the hill. Said it was cursed." Sarah felt an inexplicable pull towards it, a sense of foreboding mixed with irresistible curiosity. Sarah hesitated, a shiver running down her spine as she met the old man's gaze. The chest seemed to emanate an odd energy, a palpable aura of unease. Yet she couldn't resist the allure of the unknown. She paid quickly, eager to get the chest home and uncover its secrets. As she struggled to lift the heavy chest into her van, the old man watched her with an unreadable expression. "Be careful with that one, missy," he called out. Driving home, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Every time she glanced at the chest in her rearview mirror, she imagined she saw the faint outline of a face. But the feeling persisted, a knot of unease twisting in her stomach. Back in her apartment, Sarah wasted no time in examining her new acquisition. The chest was heavier than she expected, its wooden surface cold to the touch. She unlatched the chest, the old metal clasps groaning in protest. The musty scent of aged wood wafted from within. Nestled amongst layers of yellowed silk lay a doll. The doll's face, though cracked, was strikingly lifelike, but it was the doll's eyes that truly captivated Sarah's attention. They were two black orbs, gleaming with an unsettling life, as if staring directly into her soul. Nightfall. Shadows stretched across Sarah's apartment, twisting familiar shapes into menacing figures. Sleep eluded Sarah. Her mind raced, replaying the unsettling encounter with the antique doll. A cold draft, seemingly emanating from the closed chest, sent chills down her spine. A soft whisper, barely audible, broke the silence. "Mama?" The word hung in the air, heavy with longing and despair. Was it her imagination, or had the voice come from the doll? Something dark and sinister had awakened within the walls of her home. The following days were a blur of unsettling occurrences. Objects moved inexplicably in Sarah's peripheral vision. The soft murmur of whispers followed her from room to room. Her once peaceful apartment now felt oppressive. She tried to rationalize the strange happenings, blaming stress. But deep down, she knew the doll was something far more sinister. One evening, she heard a soft thump from the other room. The lid of the antique chest, which she distinctly remembered closing, was now slightly ajar. Exhaustion gnawed at Sarah's sanity. Nightmares, vivid and disturbing, plagued her, each one centered around the doll. She began to withdraw from her friends, her once vibrant personality now muted by fear. Driven by a desperate need to understand the evil, Sarah began researching the history of the doll. She discovered the doll was a vessel, a conduit for something dark and ancient. The whispers, the nightmares, the inexplicable occurrences, they were all connected to the doll. And Sarah, unwittingly, had become its new target. The doll's evil was reaching out, seeping into her reality with terrifying ease. Days turned into weeks, each one a torment. Sarah's once vibrant world shrunk to the confines of her apartment. Her reflection in the mirror became almost unrecognizable. One evening, a sudden wave of dizziness washed over her. As the dizziness subsided, Sarah noticed something peculiar in the mirror. It wasn't her reflection that stared back, but the distorted image of the doll. The doll's porcelain face was twisted into a grotesque mockery of a smile. The mirror now served as a chilling portal, reflecting the darkness that threatened to consume her. Desperate for help, Sarah reached out to her estranged aunt, Aunt Millie. Aunt Millie had always warned her about dabbling in the world of antiques. Aunt Millie arrived the next morning, her face etched with concern. "That doll, it's trouble, just like I warned you." Sarah recounted the terrifying events of the past weeks. Aunt Millie listened patiently, her gaze filled with empathy. "There's a ritual," Aunt Millie finally spoke. "An old ritual that can sever the doll's hold over you." The ritual had to be performed under the light of a full moon. They needed specific herbs, candles, and a personal item of the doll's creator. Sarah retrieved the doll from its chest. She found a small, leather-bound journal filled with frantic scribblings. As the full moon cast an eerie glow, they prepared for the ritual. A circle of salt was drawn, candles placed at each cardinal point. Aunt Millie began to chant in a low voice, the words ancient and heavy with power. Sarah, clutching the doll, felt a surge of conflicting emotions, fear, hope, and pity for the tortured soul trapped within. The chanting grew louder, the air thick with anticipation. The doll in Sarah's hands felt different, colder, heavier, as if imbued with a sudden surge of desperate energy. The black eyes seemed to lock onto hers, a flicker of understanding, of pleading in their depths. Suddenly the candles sputtered and died, plunging the room into darkness. A blood-curdling scream pierced the night, echoing through the apartment. Sarah cried out, her voice lost in the cacophony of unseen terror that swirled around them. Then silence. As Sarah slowly regained consciousness, her body aching and her mind still reeling from the shock of what had transpired, she realized two things. First, the doll was gone, vanished without a trace. And second, the blood-curdling scream that had shattered the night, the one that continued to echo in her nightmares, hadn't come from the doll. It had come from Aunt Millie. Sarah found herself lying on the cold hardwood floor, her body stiff and sore. The room was eerily silent, the only sound the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. The candles were gone, the salt circle disturbed, as if scattered by an invisible hand. A wave of nausea washed over her as she remembered the scream, the bone-chilling terror that had gripped her heart. "Aunt Millie?" she croaked, her throat dry and scratchy. She pushed herself up onto her elbows, her gaze darting around the darkened room. Where was her aunt? Had she imagined the whole thing? Had the ritual been a terrible mistake, unleashing something even more sinister into the world? Sarah stumbled to her feet, her legs shaky beneath her. She fumbled for the light switch, her hand closing around the familiar plastic. A flick of her wrist, and the room was bathed in the warm glow of the overhead light. Relief washed over her, momentarily chasing away the shadows of fear that clung to the edges of her mind. But the relief was short-lived. Aunt Millie was gone. Her coat, which had been draped over the back of a chair, was gone. Her purse, usually perched on the kitchen counter, was nowhere to be found. It was as if she had vanished into thin air, leaving no trace behind but a chilling emptiness. Days turned into weeks, each one an agonizing reminder of Aunt Millie's disappearance. The police dismissed it as a missing persons case, a sad but all too common occurrence. But Sarah knew better. Her aunt hadn't simply wandered off. She had been taken by an unseen force. Haunted by guilt, Sarah threw herself into her research. She revisited the notes she had gathered on the doll, the whispers of local lore, the fragmented tales of Silas and his daughter Ilara. She scoured old newspapers, hoping to find some mention of Aunt Millie, some clue as to her whereabouts. But her search yielded nothing but dead ends and a growing sense of despair. One evening, as Sarah sat hunched over a faded manuscript, a passage caught her eye. It was a legend about a malevolent entity that haunted the old house on the hill. The entity craved souls to torment and vessels to inhabit, bodies to possess and control. A chill ran down Sarah's spine as she read the words, their meaning sinking in like a stone in her gut. The ritual, the scream, Aunt Millie's disappearance, it all pointed to a horrifying truth. The ritual hadn't banished the evil presence, it had simply transferred it, offering up a new vessel, a new soul to corrupt. Sarah's reflection in the mirror no longer showed the terrified young woman she once was. Her eyes, once bright with curiosity and a thirst for the unknown, now held a weary acceptance of the darkness that had seeped into her life. She was no longer just Sarah, the antique collector. She was a witness, a keeper of a terrible secret, forever bound to the legacy of the cursed doll. She had considered going to the police, telling them everything she knew, but what good would it do? Who would believe the ramblings of a woman haunted by a doll and the disappearance of her aunt? They would think her mad, lock her away in some sterile institution where the whispers of the past would follow her, taunting her with their proximity. And so, Sarah remained in her apartment, a prisoner of her own making, surrounded by the ghosts of her past and the chilling certainty that the evil she had unleashed was far from finished with her. Sleep offered no escape, only a terrifying glimpse into a world where she was both hunter and hunted, where the line between reality and nightmare blurred until it ceased to exist. The doll may be gone, but its mark on her soul, like the faint scent of decay that lingered in the air, would remain long after the last echo of Aunt Millie's scream faded into silence. Sarah now understood the true cost of her fascination with the forgotten and the discarded. The world, she realized, was filled with echoes of the past, whispers of pain and longing that lingered in the shadows. Some echoes were best left undisturbed, their stories buried beneath layers of time and forgetfulness. But Sarah had unearthed something ancient and malevolent, a darkness that now clung to her like a shroud. She moved through her days with a haunted weariness, her once bright spirit dimmed by the knowledge of what she had unleashed. The antique chest, now empty, remained in the corner of her living room, a constant reminder of her folly and the terrible price she had paid. She couldn't bring herself to discard it, not yet. It was a macabre monument to her aunt's memory, a symbol of the unseen forces that shaped their lives. Sometimes, in the dead of night, when the city outside her windows slumbered, Sarah could almost hear Aunt Millie's voice, a faint whisper carried on the wind. It wasn't a voice of anger or accusation, but one of weary acceptance, of understanding. The doll, she realized, had been a catalyst, a doorway into a world where darkness held sway, where the lines between good and evil blurred into oblivion. Sarah was trapped not within the confines of her apartment walls, but within the prison of her own mind. The legacy of the cursed doll lived on, not in porcelain and silk, but in the chilling certainty that some evils, once awakened, could never truly be laid to rest. They lingered, whispering their tales of sorrow and despair, waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to stumble upon their path. And Sarah, forever marked by her encounter, would spend the rest of her days haunted by the chilling knowledge that she was now one of them, a keeper of the darkness, a prisoner of her own terrifying tale. If this story sent shivers down your spine as it did mine, please hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more horror confessions. Your support fuels my journey into the darkest corners of forgotten history.